rights and privileges of white people as this white person that, I mean, because when they come up and they tell you, you know, there's another couple out there that want this loan, but you know, they're black. I'm going to give it to you, okay? Just between you and me. You're going to say, no, no, no. I don't want that privilege. No, 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 no. I don't want to, oh, no, I know I could probably get a better deal, but don't give it to me. Do you enjoy that privilege? Do you not then also support and sustain the system? Because it's like you break my leg and get mad at me because I limp. So you yourself, but I didn't break your leg, Joy. I said, but did you support, sustain, vote in, and maintain the system that guaranteed your privilege, that created the pothole that I fell in that broke my leg? But y'all free. So let's look at trauma. What we understand about trauma, and there's a physiology of trauma. I'm not going to bother to get into that. But I'm going to talk a little bit about it so we can have a working knowledge of when people start talking about trauma, what they're speaking of. Now, trauma, you know, people always say to me, well, Joy, there were happy slaves. Yeah, we're going to find them. I said, but that's okay. I'm going to give that to you because I'm sure there were some. We got some happy slaves now, don't we? So I know they had to be there. We got black overseers, don't we? Okay. And any of you want a point of reference, you know, look at that, the movie Sankofa. So you can understand the notion of the injury to the black overseer. But when I look at this whole idea of trauma, you have to understand that, in fact, everyone's not traumatized by traumatic events. When those buildings fell, there were folks that weren't there, that heard about it, that saw it on the other side of the country that were traumatized. They can't get on an airplane now because they were traumatized. There were folks that were close enough to smell the bodies. They were traumatized. There were people whose loved ones were in that building who were traumatized. And there are people who escaped it, saw it fall down, narrowly escaped it, and weren't traumatized. So everyone is not traumatized by trauma. Okay, we all have what is known as a differential response to trauma, the traumatic event. But what we have to understand is what it produces. So the first thing I did in my research is I wanted to find out who exactly gets this, the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. So this is a book called The Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Anybody know what that is? If you got insurance, you better figure out what that is. Because that's what they're trying to find a diagnosis to get paid. Okay. Let me tell you what this book said when they identified the groups of people that we accept. Victims of rape have post-traumatic stress disorder. War veterans, you know, Holocaust victims, and their descendants, as a matter of fact. We have heart attack victims, victims of natural disaster, victims of severe accidents. And I kind of looked for a while. I said, they don't have slaves in there anywhere. So when I spoke to my professors, which is the reason why I don't want you to know that I think I'm obsessed with education. I have 2 master's degrees because when I was going for my master's degree in clinical psych, actually I was going to get a PhD. And when I started asking questions around this, it got a little warm. So I knew I wasn't going to get a dissertation out of them. So I had to get up out of there because I started asking some questions about why slaves weren't there, and they started giving me answers like, well, that was too long ago. This is a diagnosis that requires a certain period of time, maybe a few years or, you know, some years, but that's just far too long ago for anyone. I said, okay, I'm with that. But let's read a little bit about what it looks like, this thing called post-traumatic stress disorder. How do people behave? Marked diminished interest or participation in significant activities, feelings of detachment or estrangement from others, restricted range of affect, meaning the person is unable to have loving feelings, sense of foreshortened future, does not expect to have a career, marriage, children, or a normal lifespan. Difficulty falling or staying asleep, irritability or outbursts of anger, difficulty concentrating, hypervigilance, meaning watchfulness, attentiveness, wariness, mindfulness, alertness, and vigilance, exaggerated startle response. Now let me explain something. In order to get a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, which by the way is treatable by medication, it generally works. In order to, you don't have to have all those symptoms. You only need a few of them to get the diagnosis, okay? Just a few of those, the kind of things that, the symptomology. So now what we're going to do is become diagnosticians. We're going to go back and consider the fact that there were some percentage of happy slaves. We're going to let you have that number. We're going to let you have that number. I want to now look at perhaps the injured slave. Now I want you to tell me, based on these conditions or these diagnostic features, whether you think a good percentage of the slaves might have had them. Not all of them, not the happy ones. Okay? Number one, a serious threat or harm to one's life or physical integrity. Do the slaves get that one? Okay. Threat or harm to one's children, spouse, or close relatives. Sudden destruction of one's home or community. Seeing another person injured, killed as a result of accident or physical violence. Learning about a serious threat to a close friend or relative kidnapped, tortured, or killed. Stressor is experienced with intense fear, terror, and helplessness. Disorder is considered to be more serious and will last longer when the stressor is of human design. That's 7 out of 7. You think some of them might have had it. Now what I want to ask you now, because this is an important question, because y'all are free. Okay? Do you think or remember any time when we got that free therapy after slavery? Do you ever remember when they said, line on up, we're going to do a group thing or something with you? Do you remember that? Didn't happen, right? And then, of course, the response is, yes, but you're free now. Now, I want you to remember I told you about the person with hypervigilance, exaggerated startle response, outbursts of anger, all that? That was Mama raising Johnny. Now, here's the question. Now, we're going to move from slavery into after slavery. But let's start looking at the nature of these traumas.